your well-being goes hand in hand with being a really good lawyer. In other words, your performance is inextricably linked with how well you are being. If you are well and thriving, that's going to be an important implication for everything you do as a lawyer, because when you're thriving, you're creative, you're innovative, you can make your best work, and you can really contribute to your clients.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. I am your host, Nick Werker. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. I love saying that. I won't waste too much time going into today's intro because we have a really important topic and a really important guest to get to. Robin Wolpert, treasurer of the Institute for Well-Being in Law. I was going to say for being well in law. For well-being in law is here with me today in our interview, and we're going to be taking a closer look at how the legal community is currently dealing with wellness-related issues like depression, anxiety, and alcoholism. We're also going to be sharing some important tips on how attorneys can go about addressing some of their biggest wellness-related challenges. So let's get started. Robin, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Nick.
I'm actually so. I like doing this sort of thing because it's like near and dear to my heart, right? I have anxiety. I've been dealing with, I guess I'm not depressed anymore, but I've dealt personally with these issues. So I recognize that they're extremely important, especially in a profession where you're supposed to be go on all the time. But before I go all into that, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came to be involved with the Institute for Well-Being in Law?
So I am a lawyer who practices in Minneapolis at Sapientia Law Group. We're a women-owned and minority-owned law firm. And my area of practice is civil fraud and misinformation campaigns, cyber stalking, and I also work on criminal defense matters. And I came to this whole sphere back in 2016 when I was president-elect of the Minnesota State Bar Association. And at that point, there were two important studies that came out that for the first time quantified the extent to which the legal profession was facing chemical dependency and mental health challenges. It was the first time we had data, and it was nationwide data. And what was so important at the time was that we did not really know the extent to which the legal profession faced these kind of challenges. And so the data really shook us all when we saw it, because we learned that the field of law is perhaps the most unhealthy of all professions. Compared to the general population, lawyers were suffering disproportionately in terms of mental health challenges and alcoholism. And so that was a huge wake-up call for at least me, someone new to this whole field. It was a wake-up call for a lot of us. And Joan Biebelhausen, who is the executive director of Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, which is Minnesota's lawyer assistance program, she reached out to me when I was president-elect of the Minnesota State Bar and asked me to be involved, to get engaged. And then it's been a long-term partnership with me and Joan, where she initially was really helping me get educated so that I could spread the word and make it urgent. Like, this is an urgent issue for lawyers. It's not like something nice to have. It's like critical for us personally, for our clients, for our entire profession, and for our law students. And so it became one of my most important issues when I was bar president. And then it turns out, fast forward through the years, I've been involved in other national organizations. And I got appointed to the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing, which was run by the ABA at the time. And again, just continue to carry the torch as a past president of the Minnesota State Bar, and now as president-elect of the National Conference of Bar Presidents, where we're the group, NCBP is the group that trains and provides master classes and education on leadership. And I know bar presidents from across the country are interested in well-being. So that's really how I came to be, part of it. And I still view it as an urgent issue. one of the most essential issues of our time for our profession.
You said something about how it's not just a luxury. And I think people view taking care of their mental health or like slowing down as like this luxury that they can't afford. And it's because they enter into the profession, or they enter in to whatever profession really, but more so being a lawyer, really fresh, like excited to get working. And then you work yourself too hard and you experience burnout, or you develop anxiety, or you develop depression. And I'm a believer that you can develop those things, even though you might be predisposed to them, even though I'm not super educated on it. So that's just my opinion.
And it might be a challenge that you've faced not just once in your career, but many times. There just could be moments where you face those challenges. And one thing about the legal profession is that the culture of it, the dominant culture, has always been, you work super hard for your clients, that you sacrifice yourself, your health, your time, your obligations to your family. You sacrifice all those things for your clients because your clients are number one for you. And that culture also goes hand in hand with another thing about our lawyer culture, which is we're actually shamed for taking care of ourselves. Like if you get 8 hours of sleep, people may label you as lazy, or if you're looking out for yourself, people may draw a negative inference from that.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, another part of our loyal culture is the opposite, which is to, basically laud ourselves and, tell everyone how hard we're working, that we're working so hard that we don't have time to sleep, that we don't have time to eat properly. And it's seen as a badge of honor. So those are all the dynamics of the legal profession that, conspire, so to speak, conspire against people taking care of themselves and being well, and thinking that it's a good thing to be well in the law.
That is funny, because there is a stigma about like how hard lawyers work, and even not in like private practice, right? Like if you're an associate at a big firm, you're expected to be there and be there and be there, and
Mm-hmm.
all of your free time. I had a friend. We went to our best friend's wedding, and one of the partners at his firm told him, I don't care that you're a part of the wedding. Whatever your free time is, you better be on the phone and on the computer and reachable at all hours helping me with this. I was like, dude, that's insane. He's like, yeah, I'm quitting. And he went to go to some other practice area. But I want to ask you, because you mentioned this before, that the numbers were surprising when you first looked into how much of the legal industry was struggling with these wellness related issues. Mm-hmm. So I want to know how much of the legal industry is struggling, and what types of health issues seem to be the main sort of issues that are plaguing the legal world.
Okay, so just speaking about mental health first, 28% of lawyers meet the criteria for depressive disorder. That's based on survey data. 18% meet the criteria for anxiety disorder. This isn't just for lawyers, but judges also suffer tremendously. 15% suffer from a depressed mood. 23% of judges have feelings of anxiety. So there is a mental health challenge. And then in terms of alcohol use, problematic drinking and hazardous drinking seem to plague lawyers. And this about 21% of lawyers engage in hazardous drinking, and then attorneys who are newer, so under 30 years old, their excessive drinking reaches 36%. So some of the data show that it's not just a chemical dependency or mental health challenge, but that our newest lawyers are hardest hit. And we used to think the opposite. We used to think that the more senior you were, the more pressure you had, right? Because you were, accountable, responsible for, client matters. And that pressure was seen as overwhelming and perhaps predisposing, more senior lawyers. But what we learned from the data is that the newest lawyers are most at risk. And then we've also have data from law student studies that demonstrate that the challenges begin in law school, where you can see, again, there's a culture in the law schools prepping you for a career in the law, and the challenges for law students are also significant in terms of mental health and chemical dependency. There's also a stigma, as you know, in general for the whole population of reaching out and asking for help. In fact, if you turn on, we were talking about football before we got on the podcast, and there was an advertisement that I recently saw while watching football, which was an effort to destigmatize asking for help, and that it was okay not to be okay and to reach out for help. That stigma affects everybody across the globe. So it's not just unique to lawyers, but for lawyers, because of our culture and the notion that you're really on your own. That's what the expectation seems to be, or a lot of people believe that they're on their own. And so you have to handle everything on your own, and that could be a contributing factor to what we're seeing.
I love Dak Prescott, and that pains me to say as a Giants fan, because if you don't know, he's the quarterback for the Cowboys, and I don't like the Cowboys. But yeah, he's like he's at the forefront, I think, for the NFL in mental health and suicide prevention. And there is a stigma, right? It's like you're almost weak for asking for help. Like, oh, you can't fix it on your own. It's just anxiety. It's like the boogeyman. But I wonder, as it pertains to the legal profession, do we understand why that lawyers are more apt to develop these problems? Is it the problems that they face that sort of are traumatizing, or are they predisposed to entering the practice of law, or is it the overworking? Is there something more prevalent in the average lawyer's lifestyle that makes them more predisposed to suffer from wellness-related issues?
Well, you mentioned one thing, which was trauma, and a lot of attorneys in the public sector and in the private sector who deal with family law issues, for example, where you might have trauma, domestic abuse. In the criminal realm, in criminal law, you might have clients, or you might be prosecuting someone for violent crimes. And usually criminal activity is co-occurring with some mental health challenge. And so it could be that the exposure to that, and we know that judges also being exposed to cases involving high tensions and involving violence, domestic violence, or criminal activity, or violent activity, those things have an impact on the recipient. Even if you're not involved in the behavior that's at issue in a case, just hearing about it can be traumatizing. So we know that there are those secondary effects on lawyers. A lot of it may be due to the lack of autonomy that lawyers have over their daily lives. Many of us are run by schedules set by a court or by the rules of criminal procedure or civil procedure, which set deadlines, and they're hard deadlines, and they don't necessarily move. And so your life has to move around those deadlines. And if you have more than one case, which you're apt to do, is have more than one case, you're balancing all those required deadlines that seem to be mandatory and create a lot of pressure. There is also a culture, I think, of, and we talked about this just a moment ago, of not reaching out and getting help. A lot of times our lawyers practice in what we call solo or small practices. So you're either practicing by yourself, or you have a very small firm, and it may be that you don't have other people that you can give work to relieve your own workload. And so you're at the mercy of how, you never know how a case may blow up or extend its life. It may start as a seemingly simple or small matter and may blow up unexpectedly. And so if you're in a solo or small situation, you have few options for other people to help you. So sometimes just the structure of the practice will limit your seeming inability to get help. But even in larger firms, again, there is this culture, you have to handle it on your own. You're expected to know these things. And of course, there's ego and pride, which is, of course, I know all the answers. And don't worry, I've got it all handled. And so those may be some of the features of the legal profession that predispose or impact people. But I would point to the most obvious, which is the huge responsibility that you have. We're not physicians, so we don't have someone's actual life in our hands all the time, but we do have the fate of people and what they care about the most to them. So if it's a criminal matter, you may have someone's life and liberty in your hands. But if it's other matters like, child support, divorce, family law matters, business matters, all of these things are the most important thing to the client. And when you get the sense that, I'm responsible for the most important thing to the client, there is a heavy weight of responsibility and accountability.
I think that's so true because whenever I get worked up about my job, like I deal with a lot of stress. I'm responsible for a lot of things and I'm expected to, perform or provide or whatever you want to call it. And my wife does the same thing. She runs like ad management for a really large Fortune 500 company. And we'll get home and we're like, this is so stressful. It's this. And we're like, it's just advertising and web pages, man. Like it's not life and death. And there is the stigma that I think lawyers will tell themselves is they can't write it off like that. The stress isn't, you can't go home and say this isn't life or death because sure, a physician might work on somebody's body, but a lawyer is working on somebody's circumstances of their lives, and that can be a heavy burden to carry around. So I want to talk about the next logical thing, which is what type of advice has your organization had for lawyers on navigating these problems over the last few years? Obviously, the past couple of years have been especially challenging. But what does your organization how do you combat lawyers not wanting to reach out for help, and what advice would you give them if they are ready to receive help?
So the Institute for Wellbeing in Law was formed in we started operating in 2021, and this followed the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing's report that was published in 2017. And so our organization, IWIL, we're known as IWIL, Institute for Wellbeing in Law. We take a comprehensive approach to the well-being of the entire legal profession, including judges, including law students, and including, of course, lawyers and judges. So a comprehensive approach, what does that mean? It means that the first thing we are interested in is educating people on well-being, because a lot of people still don't know about well-being. They haven't had that kind of programming or introduction to it, and they haven't necessarily learned how important well-being is to their performance. So we've talked about some of the challenges that lawyers face, right? That maybe undermine well-being, but if you flip it around, your well-being goes hand in hand with being a really good lawyer. In other words, your performance is inextricably linked with how well you are being. And so if you flip it around, I think it's more of an empowering idea than a disempowering idea. So one way to look at well-being is, look at all these challenges we face, and let's fix ourselves somehow with our mental health or chemical dependency challenges. And that's important. But the flip side of it is that if you are well and thriving, that's going to be an important implication for everything you do as a lawyer, because when you're thriving, you're creative, you're innovative, you can make your best work, and you can really contribute to your clients in a way that makes the difference for your clients. So I think of it as well-being is key to performance in whatever field you're talking about, whether it's athletics, music, being a lawyer, anything. Your well-being, if you're thriving, that means that you're going to be performing at your peak. And so how can you manage yourself? And that's really what IWIL is about. It's not just providing information about the challenges we may face, but also educating people so they can really perform to the best of their ability and serve their clients in an exceptional manner. The goal of Institute for Wellbeing in Law is to create a cultural shift in the profession. What does that mean? Cultural shift. It means that we value well-being as part of lawyer performance. And that means we want to work in environments, law firms, in the public sector, for government agencies, wherever we may work. We want to work in environments that value well-being, because organizations that value well-being and create an environment where employees can thrive, that means they're going to be doing the lawyer's work or the judge's work in a way that really maximizes the individual lawyer or judge's potential. So how do we create a cultural shift in the legal profession so that we think of well-being as key to performance rather than well-being as nice to have, right? Like a sideshow. Like, it's great if you get it, but not critical. We don't agree with that. We think that well-being is critical. And so the first thing is to educate people about it. IWIL also conducts its own research and partners with other people and organizations to conduct research on what works. So what kind of programming or environmental factors or what can lawyers do for themselves that actually works to promote well-being? And that's another piece of our work. So I think it's education to reduce the stigma. And then the other piece of it is, cutting edge research to really propel ourselves as a profession forward to identify those things that we can do for ourselves and others that makes the difference.
So the organization came about in 2021. Obviously, you're working hard to accomplish these things, but are we starting to see the legal world change for the better when it comes to being open to discussing and handling wellness-related issues? Has there been a shift already?
Absolutely. I think that when I first started talking about well-being in 2016, I can't say that my audiences were very enthusiastic. They would sit through it like, okay, I'm going to listen to this. And people, it didn't connect, it seemed, at the beginning with people's lives. But now, I think after many years, it's probably been 5 years of programming, solid programming and commitment by bar leaders, by lawyer insurance companies, by professional regulation organizations, law schools, and other leaders, maybe in the judiciary and elsewhere. I think that the message has been not only gotten through, but it's seen as something common that we will talk about, something expected we'll talk about, as opposed to something that was nice to have and I'll sit through it kind of attitude. So I think we've had that. But I think the other thing to keep in mind, Nick, is with the pandemic, that really kind of, I think, pushed us forward. I could just tell and see the difference, because on the front page of any newspaper you'd be reading, we'd be talking about the huge emotional toll that the pandemic was having on all sorts of people, not just critical care workers and healthcare providers, but other people who are really on the front lines. And it became normal to talk about and expect that people were going to be undergoing these kind of challenges. And so with the pandemic, now it's common for people to talk about not only hybrid work or remote work, but how are we doing on well-being? Do we have a well-being committee in our law firm? Do we have a well-being committee in our bar organization? What are judges doing for well-being? What are law schools doing? We all expect that they're doing something. So the expectations have changed, and the challenges with respect to the pandemic, I think, really pushed us forward in reducing stigma. It's not that stigma is not there. It's just that there's an effort. There's so much conversation about well-being that I think that it's going to make it much easier for people to say, you know what, actually, I'm not doing okay today. Or actually, I do need help. I can't handle it by myself. Those kind of conversations, I think, are more likely to happen because the pandemic has pushed us forward and made well-being an obvious thing and something to talk about.
We will be right back after this short ad.
When a client calls, they're really looking for immediate service. Because we have Answering Legal, we're able to see every client message and we're able to contact our clients immediately. My name is Margot Gaines, and I'm a partner at Gaines & Musico. We started using Answering Legal because we were unable to answer all of our phone calls. Answering Legal has allowed my firm to get hired on numerous clients that we never would have. We get messages throughout the night and on the weekends. Sometimes we're in court or we're dealing with other clients. And because of Answering Legal, my partner and I are able to address any client concerns or any new clients immediately, and it's really increased our business. Answering Legal has allowed us to service our clients in a way that their needs are met and their phone calls are answered, and we're able to spend more time doing the things that are necessary for our clients.
I think it was sort of a necessary evil. And it's one of those things where it's like you can look at the bright side of anything, that COVID sort of pushed this agenda forward because it kind of created more of a need. And you're right, like looking at the headlines, and this is how I know it's so stigmatized, is I would read those headlines or I would see it on the news that, oh, like the children are going to be traumatized from having to wear masks in schools. And I was like, no, they're not. And I'm like, who am I to think that, right? Because my mental health problems are very real to me, and they might sound silly to someone else, but that doesn't make them any less real for me, just like it doesn't make anybody else's reality not difficult for them. So I thought that was, when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I remember thinking like that. And then, you know, you bring yourself back to reality, right? Yeah. I have to, and it's true. I'm so quick to write it off because I was raised like that too. Like, oh, stop crying. You know, there's nothing to be upset about. Oh,
suck
just,
it up.
Yes. Suck it up. Be a man.
Yep.
Sort of things like that. Right. And it wasn't until I got older that when I started to experience these problems for myself, that it became important for me to sort of identify with other people who were experiencing the same things as me. And so I want to ask you, how valuable have you seen that, how valuable is it for people to be able to have open discussions about these wellness issues and hear stories from other, as it pertains to this, from other attorneys who have struggled with their own wellness issues in the past? And have you seen this have a major impact on the type of dialogue that lawyers are having in this community?
Absolutely. So sharing your experience and what the challenges are that you're facing is critical, not only to your own well-being, because sharing is something that contributes to your own well-being, but the recipient of your speaking is also hearing things that can impact their ability to address their own well-being and that of others. And I think that most people don't realize that they actually have the power to make a big difference for other people in terms of well-being. We tend to go through life thinking I'm on my own, and so I just have to worry about myself. And if I contribute to someone else, that's nice. But the truth is, well-being is a team sport, right? It's not just like I can go play well by myself, right? I can go play the well-being game all by myself. You really play it with others. It's other people. It's groups that can get together and talk about issues and talk about challenges and contribute to you, and you can contribute to others. And that's the kind of environment that helps people thrive. So it's not an individual sport, although you may think you're all alone. It's really the reaching out. And a lot of the lawyer assistance programs across the country, they're in every single state. They are the ones that provide so much important programming for addressing all sorts of challenges, mental health, chemical dependency challenges, alcoholism challenges. They're really there with the resources, and it's the sharing that's most important. But the other piece to remember is this: it's not just our newer lawyers, but it's women and minorities, people of color, who are leaving the legal profession at a higher rate because of the kind of challenges we've been talking about, the kind of culture in the legal environment, the lack of autonomy in your job, the stress that comes with deadlines and not being able to take breaks, the stress. There was an International Bar Association global survey, which talked about the largest factors impacting your well-being are stress, high workload, lack of work-life balance, the working culture and environment, which includes workplace bullying, unrealistic time pressures, demand to hit targets, and the inability to take breaks. All those things are impacting not only our lawyer population, but significantly women, newer lawyers, minorities, people of color. And so what that means is that it's not just, again, an issue that impacts one person, but it really impacts the nature of our profession, who's in our profession, who's able to survive and thrive in the legal profession. And we want to make sure that our profession is as diverse as possible to meet the diverse needs of all of our clients. And so what's interesting to me is that this is a global phenomenon, but it's particularly of concern coming out of the pandemic, where the research is indicating that women and people of color are leaving the profession at higher rates, and they're disproportionately impacted by the challenges that the legal profession faced during the pandemic, and because of well-being issues. So it's those kind of things, Nick, that really will shape the future of our profession. Can we make our profession a place where everyone belongs here? Can we create a working environment and expectations that really value how to develop an individual so that they can really contribute the maximum they can to the profession and really give the best of who they are to their clients, and serve the public or their clients in a way that speaks well of the profession. The other challenge, of course, is when you're not well, you often get ethics issues, lawyer disciplinary issues that go hand in hand with not being well, because it's a downward spiral. And so we want to actually maximize the opportunity for people to, maintain their, perform the lawyer's work in a manner that meets ethical requirements and ethical standards.
I'm still so drawn to the idea that you mentioned before, that if you bring wellness to the workplace, like the work product gets better. And so over and over again, I found myself thinking while you were explaining that it's even if you consider this idea like a bottom line from the lens of a money-making operation, right? So say I don't have time to take care of my wellness, right? Because, I'm not making that much money as a lawyer. I don't have enough cases. I don't have enough this. I don't have enough that. My overhead is too high, so on and so forth. But imagine a world in which you focus on your wellness, and you bring that product to your clients. I would imagine that doing a better job and providing more value and bringing like you said, bringing wellness to all aspects of your practice will attract more clients, not only from referrals, but testimonials that you can get online. You'll be able to do better work on, all the parts of running your law firm, on marketing, on advertising, on generating relationships, on, just getting the better results for your clients, especially if you work on contingency, right? If you get a better result, you get paid more most of the time. So I think for people that view it as like, oh, I can't take that much time because of the billable hour or so on and so forth, that I'm sure that even from a financial perspective, that being well in this regard is a profitable venture. So if you wanted a financial incentive.
We started off talking about sports, right? Think about the role of the sports psychologist on a Major League Baseball team, for example, and how important it is to have the mental edge, right? If you're a pitcher, for example, or any player, how do you succeed and how do you become an extraordinary athlete? Well, one way is to work out and focus on all the physical things that you need to do to make sure that your body is a high-performing machine, but you also want your brain to be a high-performing machine, strategic, cognitively exceptional. And the way you do that is you have the mental edge, all right? You have a mental game as well. So just think of it that way. Or another way to think about this is that just talk about sleep. for example. So sleep, according to Matthew Walker, the world's leading neuroscientist on sleep, sleep is the most important thing that you can do to reset your body and brain health every day. All right. So you're supposed to get 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep per day. And if you don't, your cognitive function is severely impaired. In fact, you're impaired about being impaired if you don't have enough sleep. So you think, oh, I'm fine. I sleep 5 hours a day. And you're like the person who's had too much to drink saying, give me the keys to the car, because you don't have a sense of how cognitively impaired you are. So if you take care of yourself and you're actually getting the requisite sleep, not only are you preventing yourself from, destroying every aspect of your physiology, from diabetes to Alzheimer's to, stress and cardiovascular disease, all those things, even your genetic profile. But you're more likely your brain is more likely to cognitively be in peak condition to do all the kinds of hard thinking that you need to do, the creative thinking, the strategic thinking, just remembering. Okay, so you need NREM sleep and REM sleep to do all those kinds of things as lawyers. And so I would say if you are actually able to, focus on your sleep and get sufficient sleep, not only is your performance going to be severely impacted in a very positive way, but your ability to lead teams, to develop lawyers around you, to serve your client interests, to develop the potential in other people is going to be impacted. For example, a lot of people without sleep, Matthew Walker's book talks about this topic. You're more likely to engage in unethical decision-making. And it's going to cost your business. And Matthew Walker quantifies how much it costs businesses to not, to engage in these unethical kind of spiral that comes out of lack of sleep and other factors. So what I would say is, as a lawyer and as a leader, my goal is to develop the potential in others. And that means my clients, and it means all the people I work with, it means the newer lawyers who are coming out of law school. And how do you do that? Well, you have to have the mindset of a leader, and you have to be creative and innovative and really be all in for the people around you. How do you do that? Well, you have to be thriving yourself. If you're thriving yourself and you love what you do and you love serving your clients, then you're going to be showcasing that for other people, and you're going to be developing people so they can reach their potential as well. And that's what well-being is for me. It's really the opportunity to unleash the greatness in other people around you, including your clients. And so I view it as a peak performance issue, not just simply addressing the challenges that we might face and the bumps we might face in the road regarding, addiction, alcoholism, or mental health. It's not just that. It's so much more.
I love that you mentioned Matthew Walker, because he changed my life. And I'm pretty sure that you, even better than he stated it, summed up his argument on how, like, if you don't sleep enough, you're so impaired that you think that you feel fine because you're not objective anymore. I can't even, that was beautifully said.
I just remember that book changed my life too, because I used to be, I'll just tell you how I found out about it, which is itself so telling. So my rule at the time was if I hadn't had 5 hours of sleep a night, I wouldn't be able to go to the gym because I wouldn't feel up to it. So that day I had like 5 hours of sleep. So I was on the treadmill and the person next to me was telling me about the NPR interview she heard of Matthew Walker and sleep, and how I was basically killing myself by my own views, which were completely wrong about sleep. So I got the book, and then I became I feel like a sleep crusader or sleep diplomat. And so I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
Not sponsored, but I have the Whoop, which tracks all 4 of the cycles of sleep. And then there's a bunch of guys who work here. We all have it, and we're all we share our information. And we like to tease each other on who has the best recovery and the best sleep. And it's like, oh, you're going to suck today because
who has the deepest NREM spindles.
Yep. That's right. We're all teasing each other. It's bad sometimes. I'll give you a good example is sometimes like today I had 6 hours of sleep, and I met a guy in the morning. We were at a field with the dogs throwing the ball around. And the first thing he says to me is like, "Oh man, you need some extra sleep tonight. I saw your whoop score."
Mm-hmm.
But it's cool. It's like a good culture of us holding each other accountable about being healthy, you know?
I like that.
So especially for this audience, right? If a lawyer or somebody in the legal profession or anybody really who's struggling with these issues is listening to this podcast right now and believes that they are suffering from a wellness related issue like depression, alcoholism, anxiety, anything that affects mental health or their ability to do their job really well, anything that we've talked about that they identify with, are there any outlets within the legal world that they can turn to for help, and where should they go?
So the Institute for Wellbeing in Law, IWIL, IWIL, has a website. And so if you Google IWIL, you will find the website, and they have on the website, there is resources for lawyers. There's resources for all stakeholders who are involved in well-being, whether it's law schools, whether it's lawyers, whether it's judges. And so I recommend that you go to that website because that's going to be the most important resource you have. The second thing is, and the second most important resource you're going to have is in your own state, you're going to have a lawyer assistance program. And they will have resources for you. And those are the two places that I would go. If you Google lawyer well-being, you'll find IWIL. If you Google lawyer well-being, you're going to, in your state name, you'll probably be able to find your lawyer assistance program. And that information is going to be invaluable. Those are the people who are going to be part of your team. So think of these people at IWIL or people at your lawyer assistance program in your state as being a team for you, because they're committed and that's their mission. It's IWIL's mission. It's the lawyer assistance program's mission to provide resources and support for people so that they can get the help they need and they can get the information they need to be well in law. And so it might mean, and those organizations, both of them, will meet you where you are. So if you're a lawyer who feels like you're doing fine, but you want to up your performance, go check out resources on well-being because it's going to impact your performance. So go learn how you can enhance your own well-being. If you're someone who's facing a challenge, all right, and you want to address it and find out how you can get help, these organizations are going to have the resources for you as well to get you back into the space where you can thrive again. And the goal is thriving, not just in your occupation, not just inside your brain intellectually, but how you can thrive across all dimensions of your life, so you can really bring who you are to the practice of law.
I like that. It's not just for like the people experiencing the lowest lows. It's, you know, I'm doing great, but I think I could be doing better, and I want some extra help. Or if you really are struggling, that there's help for you there too. You know, I think both things are sort of like we can be the biggest bullies in our own head and say, well, I'm doing fine, I don't need help, or I'm doing so bad that I'm beyond reproach, you know? And both of those things just aren't true. There's help for you in either case. So,
right. And when you have self-talk like that, I mean, just keep in mind that you sometimes can be your own worst enemy and that you may be biased and think much more negative things about yourself than are really true. So that's why sharing and reaching out to other people and having conversations about well-being is good, because it's a reality check. A lot of us in the legal profession, you know, we have a tape going on inside of our brains that says all these negative things about us. And the truth is that we're not really like that at all. That's just what we've been trained as human beings to have play inside of our heads. And it's something that, you know, can be a roadblock. So that's why having friends, having people you trust, who you can share things with, having a work environment that's supportive where you can reach out and get assistance. And assistance may be just having another person help you with your work. It may just be something like that really lifts a huge burden and helps you, again, achieve that equanimity to navigate through life in terms of well-being.
So one of the last things I want to ask you is about the specific resources and events that the Institute for Wellbeing. I love IWIL. That's awesome. I want to ask you about those resources, events that you guys provide for the legal community. Can you tell me a little bit more about them?
Mm-hmm. So in January, this year, we had our first annual conference in January, and that's going to be a repeat event. And our annual conference is designed for everyone who's involved in well-being, because again, to create a cultural shift in the profession, you can't just reach lawyers, but you have to reach judges and law schools, and insurance carriers and lawyer regulatory authorities, all sorts of stakeholders. So, big law firms, individual lawyers, everyone is invited to these events, and the programming is tailored to various, people depending on which group you belong to, which stakeholder you are, how you practice law, whether you're in a firm or whether you're solo or a small practitioner. And those conferences are important because they provide just really nationally acclaimed speakers who can give you the best information on whatever topic it might be. And so the annual conference, you should look for IWIL's annual conference information, and that will happen in January of 2023. And then in May, we have Wellbeing in Law Week, which is a tremendous program. And by the way, I should say that Ann Bradford at IWIL, she is just tremendous in terms of her work in putting these programs together. So the Wellbeing in Law Week in May is a week-long event, as the name suggests. And again, cutting-edge programming that's going to be happening every day of that week, specific to, for example, lawyers, law schools, big law firms, and so forth. The final thing is that if you take a look at Institute for Wellbeing and Law's website, you'll see that we have a newsletter that we push out. And if you, connect with us on LinkedIn or on other social media outlets, you'll be able to access that information. And I would also Google Ann Bradford, and you will find more information out about her and her work. She's an important part of IWIL and an important, just innovative creator of much of our work.
Well, I would like to thank you, Robin, for joining me on the show today, and want to give you a thank you to all of our listeners. And I want to encourage anybody who feels like they are especially struggling, but if they need help, to visit IWIL's website. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we will be back with another episode of Everything Except the Law soon. Please be sure to check out previous episodes on the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. As a special note, links to everything covered by Robin and IWIL, and all of the resources that we just spoke about will be linked in the description of this episode. And we hope to see you next time, everyone.